Hi, Shelley. How are you?
Hi, Shirley. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Beautiful lady, you.
We're missing our
I know.
Sandy today.
It feels so weird without Sandy here.
Oh my goodness, she is having fun though, I have to say. She's
Yeah.
on a trip and she's having a wonderful time. So we're happy
Amen
for
to
her.
that.
So Shelley's going to help me with this today.
Yay.
And we are sisters sharing our heart with you.
Yay. Hi, Sandy.
She'll be watching. Oh, we're so glad you could join us today, and we have a wonderful show. I'm so happy that I could catch Shelley on her spring break to record
Thank you.
this.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we have some very wonderful information to help us through this time.
Thank you.
Help our children, and I'm so proud of Shelley stepping up there and just really going and diving into the brain.
Thank you.
And that's why we have our brain,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So I think when you are really passionate about something and you start to do further research, it just expands and explodes almost into all of this incredible information.
Yes.
So I'm excited to be able to share it with you today. And hopefully it will be helpful and you'll learn a few things about your teenager
Yes,
that
yes.
may not realize that it's actually normal and brain related.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
So, well, to start, I would like to start with one of my favorite Bible verses, but I think that it is perfect for when we talk about the brain and we talk about our body and all of those kinds of things. And it's Psalm 139:14. And it is, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And I'm like, Jesus, thank you.
Yes.
When we look at our bodies, how amazing that it's been made. And your works are wonderful, and I know that full and well. And so as we begin this show, we know full and well that we were fearfully and wonderfully made. And when we look at the brain, it is astounding to me at how amazing. Now, you guys who don't know me, I do have a background in science, so I will just completely geek out when I look at a cell. And I look at the organelles inside of the cell. And then when I look at like chromosomes and DNA and how the chromosomal numbers are exact to make species that they're not able, it's just, I could go on for hours.
You know, we should have had our scientific glasses on today.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I thought about wearing my lab coat, but I'm like, don't take it too far. I tend to take things too far.
Yeah.
So
Shelley and I got to work together
Yes.
at a Christian school and as teachers. And so that's
Yes.
how we became friends.
yeah, that was
And
a while ago, 20
yes.
years
Oh my
ago.
goodness.
Yeah,
And
20
it
years.
goes so fast. But we both love science. I love learning more and more about
Right.
the body and the brain and how it all works and how we can make it healthier and stronger.
And stronger, because
And-
it's designed that way.
Yes.
God designed us to be a self-fixing.
Yes.
It is amazing, and that's some of the research that's changed with the brain.
Yeah.
In that, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Well, I think everything has a why. Like, why are you interested in something? Why are you doing
Yes.
this? So for me, my interest in brain research goes back quite a long time ago. So in the early 80s, my brother was in a pretty horrific motorcycle accident. He went head on with a car, and he hit this part of our brain, this front part right here is the prefrontal cortex. And when he went head on with the car, as you know, our brain is just like, really, it's just like this ball of mush inside of this very hard and rigid skull.
Skull, yeah.
And so the brain began to swell, and there was no room inside of there for it to swell. So inadvertently, my brother was in a coma for about 6 months, and he did have brain damage from it, particularly the frontal cortex. And there's some really interesting things about my brother today, all these years later, in that his short-term memory is completely wiped out. He has no. So, for example, as we're talking right now, he may have forgot that he just asked you how you were, and he'll ask you multiple times.
Yes.
But when we look at the brain and we look at how it rewires itself and how little parts that we didn't know come out, he can remember in vivid detail something that happened when we were 4 years old. And he'll ask me, no, I don't remember that at all. But it's astounding to what parts actually strengthened itself and,
Yes.
and didn't.
Yeah.
And so, as I graduated high school and went into college, I took my first psychology class, and she loved the brain as well. And she's the one that really made me start to ponder what can we do to help my brother? Are there things we can do to help him? And she would show these videos on the brain of what we knew back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was absolutely fascinated with it. And so to take you kind of on that journey, at that time, we believed that once the brain was injured, there wasn't really anything you can do. But particularly in the last 10 years, we know that there is plasticity with the brain. We know that it reroutes itself, it can fix itself, and if someone has had, let's talk about like drug addiction or alcoholism, that definitely causes brain damage and injury, but we know that it can reroute and heal itself. And so that's really optimistic news as we look at all of this. So in our conversation, I thought it would be fun to talk about some brain misnomers, things that people think are true that are not, that kind of drive me crazy when I hear people say that. So the first one is multitasking is impossible. I know I have stood on that bandwagon and said I am the greatest multitasker in the world. That is not true. My brain cannot multitask. And so what I'm doing is compartmentalizing all of these things and not really doing anything very good because our brain is not designed to work that way. And so that's why maybe if you go into the bedroom and your teen's got the TV on and the earbuds on, listening to music and doing homework, it's really not efficient because our brains aren't wired to work that way. Another just fun fact is this adult brain weighs, and this isn't real, by the way, if anyone's like thinking that I'm sitting here touching it and holding it. It is a model, but it only weighs 3 pounds. And when we think about this 3-pound organ in our body and all of the things it does, it's pretty fascinating. 3 pounds, that's it.
I know, I said, Shelley, bring a brain for our centerpiece.
And of course I have one, so that might be more frightening than anything. I've got actually 3. So which one do you want?
Make sure it's not real.
Well, I have some of those too for the classroom for the kids. So, but they're sheep brains. They're not human brains. So that kind of makes it a little less weird, I think. I think. Another fun fact is our brain is made up of 75% water. That's why when we look at dehydration, that is one of the major cause of problems with kids. And you and I as teachers, and we know because I remember us going to camp with the kids.
Right.
And the first thing they start to do is complain of a headache.
Right.
Well, it's because you're dehydrated. And we've told you multiple times to be making sure you're really hydrating and drinking a lot of water. So that's just a really fun fact to remind your teens, especially because they get a little stubborn about simple things like drinking water, like you would ever figure. Not soda or anything like that, just water. Just and so, again, 75% of the brain is water.
Wow.
As the human brain will triple its size in the first year of life. So that first year of life, anybody with those little babies at home or newborns, you just look at this precious little being, and that is the most absolutely fascinating and exponential time of growth for the human brain. That's pretty amazing though when you think about triple the size. So that's why those connections in newborn and infancy are so important, and making sure that you're reading and that you're having great verbal, a lot of verbal stimulus and all of those great things that help our brain become stronger. Headaches are a cause of chemical reactions.
Yes.
We are in a world that is filled with chemicals, as I'm sure, and I know in your other shows you've talked about that as well. But when we look at the chemical bombardment on all of ourselves, that's why, and I know I've noticed an increase of students complaining about headaches in the classroom in the last 20 years, that they're always like, I know it's because all these chemicals, but that's
inside the classroom and outside the classroom.
Just everywhere. Even our skin, it's just our largest organ, and when we put things on it, it goes directly into our blood system. And so being really mindful about the lotions and the whatever, I know it's popular in teenagehood to go to Body and Beyond and lather themselves. Oh, my son started using Axe, and we had to have a big conversation about that. That is not allowed in my house anymore. That triggered headaches for me, but it triggered a lot of others. Like, that's the most gross smell I've ever smelled. So another fun fact is that the human brain contains approximately 100 billion neurons. 100 billion. And when we look at the brain, 10% of this brain are neurons. So neurons are 10% of the brain. If you think about that, that's the same number of stars in our Milky Way galaxy. So one of the things about science and one of the things about God, when I look at creation, I'm always amazed at the correlation and similarities and absolute beauty.
Yes.
I am someone
Yes.
who loves space science. I know some of you guys out there know me, and I've got my little NASA stuff that I work with, and I absolutely love it. But I absolutely love the correlation that God created us to mirror what was so amazingly beautiful out there too.
So true.
And then there's trillions of connections or synapses. Some people call them synapses that you've probably heard before that happen daily. It's like this big neuron forest inside. And I'm sure maybe on social media, because there's this popular picture that goes around that shows the tree branching out, and it looks very similar to our brain. And when you think about those neuron connections branching out like a tree, it's amazing, and it can be built and it can become stronger, and we can do a lot of things to help our teens in that time of connection and so forth. And just another fun fact is neurons pass information 250 miles per hour. So when you feel like your brain is going, it is literally, it really is.
Well, that explains a lot.
And I know this is why we've always.
I have
No.
a really active brain, so it's like,
you and
yeah.
I, this is why we
Yes.
get each other so much. 'Cause
Oh,
we're
yes.
exactly the same. Like
Yes.
when we talk
I think
about
we're twins. I think
it's
we are
just-
twins.
It is so amazing too,
Yeah.
though, because I can feel it, and
Yes.
I know for myself, and we'll get into that. But during this time of the pandemic and being in isolation, I've actually had to start calming myself down. Calm. And so Shirley and I prayed before this, like, just let's be calm. So it's a beautiful thing. So it is a myth that we only use 10% of our brain. It's really interesting research on that. A scientist, and I'm sorry I don't recall his name, but a long time ago, just kind of randomly said it, didn't really have any facts or substantiation to that claim.
A scientist
No,
randomly said it.
He did. It was just kind of how we're talking
Huh.
right now.
Wow.
And then it got picked up, and it's never stopped since. But
Wow.
it's simply absolutely not true. The time we use the least amount of brain power is when we sleep. And so sleeping is something that's absolutely amazing, but we use even more than 10% of our brain when we sleep. So I think that that's just a really fascinating thing about
Wow.
the brain and all of those kinds of things. Here's something that I didn't really know until recently, but when we talk about cholesterol, all we do is hear cholesterol is bad, cholesterol is bad. But cholesterol is key to learning and memory in the brain. So if there's not a good level of cholesterol.
Good cholesterol.
Good cholesterol,
Yeah, right.
yes.
Yeah.
And so the brain is just a big fatty organ, and it needs that fat. And so I remember, Shirley, you probably remember this too, is back in our day, the big fad diet was a 100% fat-free diet.
Yeah.
And I think about the damage that we must have done, because I know I was on that bandwagon at being 16 years old
Yeah.
and eating zero fat for an extended period of time. You have to have fat in your diet. Those lipids, there's the
yes.
basic components
healthy
of life.
fats, yeah.
Yes, it's lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins. And without those three, or an overemphasis of one without the other.
Right.
So it's that balance.
Yeah, I don't buy anything that says fat-free.
No,
on it.
right.
Or
I cringe to think about how long I ate a diet of purposely trying to cut all fat whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's probably why my brain's like this now. Just kidding. But 25% of our body's cholesterol is in the brain. So 25% of that good cholesterol that we eat does go to the brain, and it's able to utilize that for those synapses functions. And so there's a myelin sheath that covers each of those neurons that can make that firing. It's like electricity, basically. And so our brain is highly, highly dependent upon cholesterol. So I love that. I think that, I didn't realize the importance of cholesterol to our brain. I mean, and I always am conscientious of bad cholesterol for my heart.
Sure.
Because most of us know that heart disease is the #1 killer of women, particularly our age.
Right.
It's kind of like that silent thing that most people don't even know that they have an issue with it.
Yeah,
Dreams.
that's so true.
We got to talk about dreams.
Oh,
I
yes.
love dreams because dreams are believed to be a combination of our imagination. So I must have a really crazy imagination.
Me too.
Our philosophical and neurological factors. So when those three things come together, they create the dreams that we have. And so I just thought that was really interesting. Our dreams take place in what's called our limbic system, and the limbic system is this part here in the middle. And this is where the amygdala is also located, which is our emotional area. So our dreams derive from our emotions. So that's why maybe if you're feeling a little anxiety or you're feeling stress, you have nightmares because it's your body's way of releasing those emotions that maybe did not normally happen. And this is another fun fact. We typically have about 4 to 7 dreams per night. So this is adults. Kids tend to dream a slightly bit more. And so, but we have 4 to 7. I know we don't typically remember them. Typically speaking, I don't remember my dreams unless they're the ones right before I woke up.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
and then our short-term memory lasts about 20 to 30 seconds. So our short-term memory is literally, like we said, short. It's short. I'm going to mess up this word, so I apologize up front, but brain freeze, we've all had it, right?
Oh, yeah.
We've been eating the ice cream, we're like, oh, brain freeze. That is a warning system. Your body is warning you to stop. That's not good. And if you don't and continue, it could lead you into danger. And that's what our brain is. It's like we think, but our brain is just wired for just knowing, like, this is danger. And brain freeze is called spinophosphaline. I'm not even gonna try it, but I'll have you type it out because I'm gonna just mess it up absolutely tremendously. But another fun fact is the brain does not feel pain. And so when you look at crazy things through history, I know there used to be a TV show, I don't recall what it is, but they showed an arrow that went through someone's brain and they were fine, but it doesn't feel pain. And that's why when you hear of people getting like open brain surgeries, that they don't feel it. So many times they will just localize the anesthesia as opposed to, because you don't feel it. And it's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it?
Huh.
The brain gets smaller as we get older. So all of us aging, we know, and that's, we can see signs of that in some of our loved ones who have dementia or Alzheimer's and those types of things. We know that alcohol affects the brain, and of course drugs and all of those kinds of things. But I think I brought up alcohol because it is legalized and it's something that's so socially acceptable. However, it does cause memory loss and cognitive issues. So that's kind of, one scary kind of thing.
I think smoking and
and back to all those chemicals
right.
Right. And the nicotine is very, very, Your brain uses 20% of the oxygen and blood in your body. So as we've been talking, as your blood's pumping through and we're breathing and all the oxygen's going into our body, our brain, 20% for this little 3-pound organ. That's pretty substantial when you really stop to think about some of those fun facts. So I find that fascinating. And so it's why it's so important to keep highly oxygenated exercise. And how do you do that? Exercise. And there's a lot of research, and I've been looking at a lot of research because during the isolation and the pandemic, I'm sure I can speak for myself that I just kind of stopped my exercise routine. I have really slowed down and I'm feeling the effects of that. And when I look at my students, particularly because we're still online, so I see them in Meet or Zoom meetings, and they are complaining of feeling sluggish. And it's because when we move our body, we oxygenate our body. And if our brain's using 20% of that, it's a highly oxygenated. And then back to, if 75% of our brain is water and we're not hydrating, all of these things really create adverse reactions, which typically in teens leads to depression. And there's a lot of research to substantiate that. This brain has so much activity, it can light a light bulb. So if you could hypothetically hook it up,
there you go. There's a science project for you.
Oh, would that be frightening? Oh, I can see someone. We didn't say that because I can see someone trying that. Well, Mrs. Richards and Miss Munoz said it. I could just see it. Those fun things. And back to the brain in that first year of life, that it triples in size. One of the greatest things that you can do for your child when they're in that younger stage of life is reading out loud. Because I didn't know this until recently, but reading out loud, like when we read aloud or when we read to ourselves, it uses completely different parts of the brain. Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
And that's why if you're a classroom teacher, some kids might actually be able to read to themselves, but when you ask them to read out loud, and there's a lot of different factors for why that might be, but it's really difficult because that's a whole different part of the brain that might not have been as, well established as the part where we read it to ourselves.
Very interesting.
It really is. And so to promote brain development, make sure you guys are having lots of conversations. And the conversations with middle school and high schoolers where it really should change as far as developmental, sometimes our parents need guides in developmental processes, is asking them their thoughts and really listening and giving them the opportunity to explore what they think about a particular subject. And I mean, let's just be frank, this past year, we've had nothing but opportunities of conversation and where does our family fall into this. And Shirley and I know this, teaching science. I teach science in a public school, so I constantly encourage my parents and my students to go home and find out as a family, what are our belief systems on this? Religiously, what does our faith say about this? What can we understand about this? But just because it's being taught doesn't mean it's necessarily correct. And I think that that's a really powerful conversations. And as you start to do that with your youngster, particularly around 11 through 16, it gives their synapses an opportunity to connect really strongly. And then your brain is mostly fat. I think we kind of talked about that back with the carbohydrates and so forth. So, and lastly, for fun facts, and then we'll get into some of this COVID stuff and our teenagers, is that sleep is absolutely imperative. And so the three big ones I think I hit on and some fun facts is water. We've got to stay hydrated. Our brains just cannot possibly work. Exercise. If you're not in a daily, and really I'm thinking about our teens, because you taught PE for how many years? Many years.
Yeah.
And so you know the importance of movement. I have noticed that so many kids, if they're not in sports and maybe taking that to an extreme, there's no movement whatsoever.
Right.
And I work at a school that doesn't have PE or any kind of physical. And during this online time, kids haven't been moving. They haven't been going for walks or runs or whatever exercise. So, and then lastly, sleep. If I could encourage you today to take anything away from this talk, is to really focus on even yourselves, hydration, exercise, and sleep. Those to me are the three biggest ones that you will see immediate improvement if you put yourself on a daily daily dose. And I'll talk about dose here in a little bit, because I talk a lot about daily dose, and I think it's really important. So
what I learned,
yes, because this is your expertise.
well, I do not take my phone into the bedroom anymore. Because if I hear like a little bzz, then I'm curious.
Right. No, for
You know,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I leave it out in the family area.
Right.
So that I'm not distracted. I don't have anything going on in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Because I can't. I'm just too ready to go, and I need my sleep.
Right.
I'm definitely a person that has to have my sleep.
I didn't bring the book, but since we're talking about what you had mentioned it, there's a book, his name is Quick, Kwik, I believe, and his last name really is Quick, but he teaches a lot on brain and how to better improve our brain based on daily habits. And he has, which has made a massive improvement in my daily schedule, is like a little night schedule ritual kind of thing to do before you go to sleep. And when you read it, you realize why so many people are not sleeping good. And that is exactly what he says to you, is to take the phone in a completely different room and have a family station, one of those family docs, and have everyone do that.
Yes.
Because the light off the phone, the blue light and all of those kinds of things. But I think that you guys would love what he suggests doing before you go to bed. Like if you do this nightly, kind of having like a little ritual that you follow, and to start with meditation and prayer, and to really focus. Gratitude is a huge thing for our brain, guys. If you start with a heart of gratitude and those positive things before we think before we go to sleep, they affect our dreams and they affect how our cells will be able to regenerate. And to maybe make your nice cup of hot tea that of course no caffeine or anything, but to put yourself in a state of relaxation. And one of the things, I like to read a lot of entrepreneurial kinds of things, and to give yourself maybe one little piece of knowledge that you learned, like something that you learn each day, and it doesn't have to be anything big. So maybe today you learned that the brain is 75% water. That's something. So to move on each day, building our knowledge. But it's a great book. Some of it's really good, and then other parts of it on how to memorize stuff. I think, it's good, but it's like,
I love that my husband well, this is prior to cell phones. When our kids were growing up, he would go into the bedroom and spend time with each child.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and time to talk and kind of catch up on the day if
So
he hadn't had a
beautiful.
chance to talk very much. And he would pray with them.
Yes.
But he would listen to them, because sometimes
My goodness, how
we
beautiful.
don't get that chance. If we don't sit around the table like you did in the olden days to share what's going on for your day,
It's so right.
and you send them off to bed
Right.
without like a little kiss and a hug, go sit with them and say, "How was your day? Tell me what's going on. Any struggles? Anything that
Right.
went great?
Right,
Share
right.
that conversation with each other."
Wow.
And that way you can say, "Oh, you had this struggle today. Well, let's pray about that."
And Shirley, I was just thinking about is the research I've done with depression and with the current status of what's going on with our teens right now.
Yes.
Most kids will say they feel disconnected
Yes.
from everything. And
Yes.
if they feel disconnected in their own home, how can they possibly branch out and feel connected within the community and onward to this
Right.
global society that we're all living in now? So that
Yeah.
is wonderful. So there's an encouragement for all of our parents out there,
Yeah.
even regardless if they're 17 years old, still
Right.
go in.
Oh, especially if they're 17 years old.
Isn't that the truth?
Right.
Isn't
They
that the truth?
need you more, I
Yes.
think, at 17, because they close off a lot of
Oh,
times.
they sure do.
And
They
so
sure
you don't
do.
know, you're just thinking everything's all good. Go check it out.
Please, yeah. And
Yeah.
and the numbers of depression now, the last stat that I looked at, and I'm not sure of the legitimacy of it because I think it was Time magazine, but said that depression in our teens in this last year has gone up 487%. If that's not staggering and enough to shake everybody to be like, we need to pay more attention to our kids, I don't know what it is, guys.
Yeah.
It's a really, we're at a crisis in our country right now, and but the thing is, this crisis was going on beforehand. The pandemic just exacerbated
Right.
what was already occurring.
Starting, yeah.
And I think if anything, there's always a positive to pull out from any terrible situation. I think that the pandemic shook us to realize the amount of time that we were not spending with our family.
Right.
So now we had time to sit around that dinner table and to talk, and we didn't have the sporting events. And I realized even with myself, I was involved in way too many things that really didn't offer, I
Yes.
think, what God's plan was for my life. It was
Yeah.
just maybe keeping me distracted. And so when we look at our kids, I think the pressure for our teens now is, I don't even know a number to put on it from when we were teens, because
different.
I actually wrote something about this. I wrote a little article about this because back when I graduated, I'm going to date myself here. When I graduated from high school, but it was those really fun movies like Pretty in Pink and Breakfast Club and all of those wonderful movies of the feel-good time of the teens, and it wasn't the stress that our kids feel now, because time of being 16 years old in today's world is heavy. They're worried about everything from A to Z, from their SAT scores, their college, their essays. I'm just kind of concerned of what we've done to our young people.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and the movies they watch now are nothing what we used to watch.
oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
I thought they were kind of, like maybe even risque back then, but now as that pendulum has swung, you're so right.
Yeah. So you can't find a wholesome.
No.
It's unless you go through the Christian movies.
Right.
That is so.
And I think that's
wonderful,
something
but-
we all need to really try to
Yeah.
promote is more family based.
Yes.
And I am appalled. We don't even watch all that stuff.
gosh,
So
no,
sometimes
no.
I'm a little unaware because I don't personally watch it, but I just go back to the mindset. My senior year was having fun, going to the beach. I had a VW bug and
There
it
you
was just
go.
bopping around. And going to the mall and wearing cute, I guess I'm a
Right?
valley girl, right? I wear cute little shoes, and they were jellies. You remember the jellies? Our kids' senior year has been a complete, I just don't even know what to say about it. They've been concerned. They've watched political unrest in our country.
Yes.
They've watched racial divide. They've seen their dreams ripped away, and just so much hardship. So back to
Yes,
the beautiful
yes.
thing that Bill did is
Yes.
that we've got to connect with these kids, guys. They are, even if you think they seem fine. I
Yes.
mean, I learned that many years ago when I was a young person, is if you act like everything's fine, everybody will leave you alone.
Right?
And I learned that young, and it's a good coping mechanism for people who want to push you away. So I dig. There's a really famous scientist who says in order to really get to the root cause, you have to ask why 5 times.
Wow.
When you're talking, why? When you talk again, why? If you really dig, then you'll get to the source. If you ask why
Yes.
once, you're not going to get there.
Very
And-
good. I like that.
Yes. And as far as mainstream, I do like Simon Sinek, what he says when we look at business completely opposite. You got to know your why. If you know your why, everything else figures out. And for all of us
Yeah,
watching this, our
right.
why is our family and our kids.
Sure.
And if we're teachers, we want to be able. So the first thing I want to talk to you about your teens, because we're all going to giggle and laugh because we've all experienced this with our lovely teens. I'm really going to be focusing on from about 12 to, let's say, 17. Really, teenagehood, the way the brain is developed, does not stop. Really, they're not developed until they're about 25, 28 years old. And
Yes.
that's where I feel like
Yes.
all the stuff we just talked about is incredibly unfair for our teens, because this prefrontal cortex up here, the executive decision makers,
yes.
has not even developed. And we're
Exactly.
asking them to make, like, for example, my son got accepted to a few colleges, and I'm asking him to pick. And how frightening, because he really doesn't have the
Right.
ability. And of course, we're trying to help him through this process, but it's pretty heavy when you really stop to think about it. You don't really have the mental capacity to go through it the way we do, because
Right.
we have developed and we have
Exactly.
these. So again, the prefrontal cortex is the front part of the brain right here, and this does not typically develop until they say up to 28 years old now. So now I realize, like, back at my 20s,
Yes.
maybe why I did some of the really crazy things I did.
Right?
Because now I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm going to go ahead and open up the brain here. Our teenagers live in what's called the limbic system. This is the emotional
Emotions, yeah.
area. And so this is where the amygdala rests, and the amygdala is known for anger, craziness, slamming doors, all of those kinds of things. But to give our teens some leeway and understanding, they're not able to rationalize something that's happening here in the part we can. And I see this all the time being a teacher, where parents are expecting their kids to be able to fully function here, but they can't. They're functioning here.
yeah.
So that's why when you see teenagers who are going through emotional angst, I mean, we've all heard the teenage angst, right? That they take things so much more emotional
yes,
than we do.
yes.
And it's because of it's normal.
Right.
That's how the brain is developed and wired and so forth. So when you think, oh my goodness, they seem so angry about the simplest thing, it's because there's an overabundance, especially when we look at the hormonal changes and
Yes.
so forth.
Yes.
That is what's going on with them. And when they think that they fell in love, it's really serious, and we've got to talk to them through those things, because all of the emotions they're feeling are supersonic and compared
Yeah.
to what
That's a good word for
I
it.
don't know. Yeah, it may not be the best, most scientific word, but so I want to talk a little bit about, like, this part of the brain and what it does. We are developed in it. This is what should be working. A fun fact too, though, let me talk about this too, is that if any of us have family members, because I think we all have family members, if we're honest, that have alcohol or drug dependency, and their brain becomes stunted, and these processes that we're talking about are not able to ever move past that point of where drug and alcohol abuse started. And so if they were 12 and now they're 45, and all these years they're stuck as a 12-year-old, and we have to remember that when we look at programs and things for them, that they're stuck in that. So we're able to see the possible outcomes. We're able to think through things. They can't. They get all emotional about it. And so that's just some of the fun parts of it. Estimating time and effort necessary to achieve an outcome. How many of you guys always complain your teen's always late, never on time, can't seem... and another thing is organization, especially with schoolwork. And, as a teacher, I've always really struggled with this, that I've had parents that say of a 12-year-old, be really hard on their kid, that they should be able to plan this out. But they can't, guys. They're just not able. And that, as a parent or an educator, is where we need to step in and help give them tools to be able to do that. And developmentally, girls tend to be a little bit more developed than boys, and no one's really sure why that is. But especially in the preteen years, we see a lot of that. So I'm trying to think of so many other things. I'm thinking about like the teenage brain and angst and so forth. So we know it's naturally more emotional. And so when we see some of those horrible emotions that we're just like, why? Unorganization is a really big deal. They're not able to cognitively connect all of those kinds of ways to be able to time. Time is a little bit sketchy when it comes to that.
I was going to mention what I learned is you cannot reason with a teenager at the time that they're having a meltdown. You have to let them
Yes.
have their space, have their
I
meltdown.
do not agree with you more.
Yes, and then come around at another time when everything's going well and say, let's maybe talk about
Yes.
what happened and see if we can come up with a few options that would be
You know what, Shirley, you just
acceptable.
gave the best piece of advice, because when someone's coming in their amygdala,
Yeah.
when they come from that place, you cannot reason or
Right.
rationalize. If you do, you're exasperating this emotional feeling that they're feeling.
Yes.
I've been guilty of it, and
Well, sure.
instead of just walking away,
Yes,
it's and it's something that as all
Yeah.
around, you are so right with that, and I'm really glad that you said that. So we have to give our teens the time to go through that emotional experience and then come back when it's like safe ground. It's like walking on eggshells, right? But I'm really glad you said that,
Yeah.
because that is very important. That once it's not like a trigger, you can just come in and out of
Right.
those processes.
Right.
And so another thing is just planning for the future. Teenagers really don't have the mental capacity to plan for the future, because they're not able to have that executive function. And I think that that's really important, because I see at 16 we're asking them to make lifelong decisions. What is your major going to be? What career are you going to have? And
where do you see yourself in 10 years?
the whole 5-year
It's like,
question. It's
what?
like,
I don't even know what I'm doing
I was
tomorrow.
going to say, at 16,
Yes.
I wanted to be a rock star. Like, isn't it? We saved the world that didn't happen. But
Oh,
I mean,
gosh.
really, seriously, why do we push them so hard in that? I mean, I know I think I know the answer. It's a whole different show, but it is something to be. So now, on a more positive note, I think this is really a fun book, and it's called Habits of a Happy Brain. And I love it because it talks about your daily dose. Dose meaning dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. So
Wow.
our
Woohoo.
brains have this amazing capacity
We love
to
those words.
We do, because they're happy words.
Yes.
But I kind of wanted to touch on this too, that there tends to be in this happiness movement. Sometimes I call it toxic positivity. And I think it's almost nauseating how it's like, okay, I know we need to be positive, and I'm not full on
right.
for that, but there is a place where, and especially with our teens, sometimes I see people talk to our teens with toxic positivity, like, oh, it's okay, I went through that. We really have to honor their genuine experience of what they're feeling.
Yeah.
So the brain is not wired to feel happy 100% of the time. And so I feel like we see things on social media. We're not supposed to feel happy 100% of the time, because God created our brain to be this wonderfully and fearfully made thing that we sense fear. And fear is very good, because it's a warning to tell us,
Right.
not good, don't do that. We also have negative emotions that are released, such as cortisol, to tell us, danger, danger, do not do that. And so back to that prefrontal cortex not being developed, that's why we see our teens sometimes do things that we at our age would never do. So for example, when I was 16, I may have been friends with my son jumping off the pier at Oceanside, because that would have seemed really cool. Do you think I would do that today? I'd be like, what? So, but it just goes and shows those things that, but I think the reason I wanted to bring up the daily dose is because I think there seems to be this false narrative out there that we're supposed to feel happy 100% of the time. And it's really important for you to validate with your kids, your teens, especially during this time of their unhappiness, that it's okay and it's normal. And yes, we're all experiencing something in this. And I've been really honest with my son, like, I just don't know how to deal with this. And back to toxic positivity, sometimes I would look at this as maybe being toxic is that, we'll hear people say, well, and it's very true, but there were wars in the past, there's kids in, refugee camps, and I I totally agree that for them, that's a horrific event. But for our kids, isolation is what's been the horrific event.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
don't talk
that's true.
enough
Yeah.
about how isolation affects human beings because God created us to be social beings, to connect, to be with each other. And the most connective time in our lives is in high school. That is, our friends are the world to us. We're not
Yes.
so concerned. And when you've taken that away, you've
Yes.
created this massive void for our kids. And back to Bill, let's talk to them. How are you feeling about that? Because your whole identity has now been stripped from
Yes.
you. And I know all of us, if we think back to our high school experience, it was friends, it was the hanging out at the beach, or even the 7-Eleven. There was a 7-Eleven by my high school, and we'd all meet up there after school. And so that was the fun thing to do, but to really be mindful and not to get too far into negativity. But I mean, that's why prison camps use isolation as a
right.
tactic of mental
Right.
confusion and all of the horrific things that it does to people.
Yeah.
And in some regards, our kids have gone through a variety of that. And isolation, we all know this whole experience has been very different for everybody. I love the saying that goes around social media that we're all in the same storm, but we're all in a very different boat.
Right.
And depending on what boat your kids, I have seen a lot of kids flourish through this. This was their thing, and they had a wonderful family support, and they had wonderful, technological things in their house that made it a gift. But I look at the majority of kids who, parents were working or they've been watching multiple kids beyond, maybe under 10.
Yes.
I see it every day in my classroom where a 13-year-old kid's trying to learn, and they've got an 8-month-old and a maybe 3-year-old, and they're trying to juggle all of that as well. But the fun thing is I know my kids in a different way that I've never known students before. I know their
true.
cats, their
Right,
dogs, but
right.
it's been kind of fun. And I will say this has been one of my most favorite years with kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because I see them differently.
Differently,
And the growth as an educator it's given me so much empathy and understanding. And so when you look at your teen today, I hope that you look at them with a lot of empathy and understanding, and just to understand that this has been a real thing for them, and that bless their little brains, they just haven't been really developed enough at this point to really understand. And though, I could say there's a lot of things we can do to increase our daily dose, and there's lots of great things to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Sunshine, getting out in the sun, exercise. Gratitude is going to be one of the most important things. My son will not keep a gratitude journal, but when he goes to bed at night, I ask him, what are the 3 things, like to reflect, to pull out positives, because regardless to how hard this has been for all of them, there are positive nuggets, and we try to focus on those. And so, it's kind of like if you think about a rose, talk to them about what was good in it, what was the thorn in it, and then what can we continue to grow out of this. So, I always kind of go through the beautiful, the hard, and the growth aspect of it. So, when you have those conversations, help them see, because we as adults have to help them go through that prefrontal cortex of the executive functioning of asking questions that will help guide theirs. And by doing that, you're creating a great deal of synapses that will be very beneficial for them when they do completely develop in that area.
2 things that
yeah.
popped into my mind. Also, please pray with your children, and teach them that it's okay to have all those feelings, because everybody has the same things, struggles. Everybody has them.
Yes.
But when you can sit and pray and just release them to the Lord. We went to retreat this past weekend, and we just held out our hands before the Lord, like as all the things we're holding in our hands, and we released one thing at a time, our own personal things before the Lord.
Shirley, that's beautiful.
Yes, and 10 things. I don't know. Some may have more than 10 things, but by the end of it, we were surrendered to the Lord. And I think that's such a great visual, just to say your own heart, your own soul has a lot that it's carrying. So release it to the Lord. Just ask Him to take it give you peace.
Right.
Because he will give you peace if we can just do that one part. The other part, I think, when you were mentioning, because I have to do my swimming.
Yes.
It helps me so much. It helps
does.
me with the proper breathing. It helps me get my muscles, my joints moving. It just
And I'm
stretches
just going
me
to be
out.
frank with you. You look better today than you did 20 years ago.
Thank you.
No, and
You're so sweet.
You do. You look amazing. But I can
Thank you.
see it.
I
you can
am
see it.
so happy. God has just been teaching me so much
Yes.
about restoring my health back, and
You can see
I'm
it.
still working on my injuries, my old injuries, but He's teaching me.
Right.
And the other part of it is eating healthy, because the days that if I go several days with eating junk,
Yeah.
treats,
It
I
is
don't
so
feel the
true.
same.
No.
And so train your children. You have a choice of eating a bag of chips or some celery with maybe some peanut butter on it.
Right.
These are two choices. Which do you think might make you feel better if
Right.
you eat it? Because this is going to do this in your body. This is going to do this in your body. You have a candy bar or an apple. Set it out in front of them and say, what do you
Right.
think might make you feel better?
Right.
Train them when they're young, so they can go, oh, well, that's going to make me not feel sluggish, and it's going to
Right,
make me
right.
maybe possibly break out, teenagers. You
For
right?
sure. Oh yeah, my son struggles with that too.
Yeah, so everybody went through that. So the healthy stuff, you just lay it out before them. You get to choose.
Right.
I mean, we get to choose as adults, and there's plenty of times I'll grab that donut.
Right.
But if I want to feel well, I'm going to choose this over here.
And that is research based, giving
Yeah.
children options.
Yes.
Give them opportunities to make choices.
Yes.
Because that strengthens those synapses as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
And you're hitting right on. I've been studying under a very famous neuroscientist named Dr. Amen, and that's one of the things.
Yeah.
I love him so much because
Yeah.
I agree, especially with depression.
Yes.
So just really quick, what his research says is that when you go typically to a doctor for depression, it's one pill size fits all. But the thing is in the brain, we are all experiencing it differently.
Yes,
And so he
yes.
does a brain scan to see where blood is flowing, maybe too much, maybe perfectly, or maybe underactive. And then he's able to better isolate the regions of the brains that are, maybe you had a brain trauma when you were young, and that fall down the stairs, you never thought anything about it, but he can see through your scan
Wow.
that there was issues there. And he's a huge advocate on nutrition and supplemental
yes,
nutrition
yes.
for because
Natural is always better.
natural,
Honestly.
of course it is. And to really focus on those nutritional benefits, because our brain can repair itself.
Sure.
It can rewire itself. And we know through neuroplasticity work like Dr. Amen that it is neuroplastic, and it does what that means is it's very malleable, and that
Yes.
as a matter of fact, I have a friend who was in a horrific accident, and a big portion of the left side of her brain was removed.
Oh,
You would never, she did have to
Wow.
go through a process of relearning everything. You would never know it when you met her and talked to her, but
Wow.
it's based on the latest research of neuroplasticity and the rewiring, and through therapy and, those different kinds of avenues, you can help and fix your brain.
Yes.
And, there's so many great books on fixing, how to do that. But again, nutrition's going to be key.
Yes.
Hydration's going to be key.
Yeah.
Exercise is going to be key. The sun is super important. Now I know we need to protect our skin from certain elements, but all of those kinds of things.
Well, and your gut is considered your second brain.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's
and it's so
very
important. If you're having digestive
Yes.
issues, lots of allergies and stuff, it's everything is attached. It's called your second brain. So you have to find the natural things that are going to bring your gut
System
back into
to a
balance.
balance. Yeah.
And then you will see things
Yeah.
starting to change. I know. I look better. I know I feel better than
Yes,
because I was
yes.
very sick back in
Right.
my 40s and 50s, and so it's
Wow, yeah.
taken
Well, it
time.
takes time, and I
It
think
does.
that's the thing. And as we reroute our brain synapses, maybe with better habits, maybe
Yes.
with different, you want to create a habit. I heard somewhere one time it's 23 days. It's actually going to be longer than that.
Oh, yeah.
But we can definitely create sustainable change with those. And positive thinking and gratitude, and it takes away those negative thoughts, because Dr. Amen calls those ants, automatic negative thoughts. We all have them, and they run around in there,
Yeah.
and sometimes to no avail. But as we start to be mindful of them and say, hey, I'm in control of this, and stop those ants from running around like crazy,
Yeah.
we become stronger, and we create synapses and connections that take that away. Speaking of synapses, I want to talk about something really I think is fascinating about a child's brain.
Yeah.
Is that in elementary school, they have all of these wiring and connections. And so that's why when you see a little kid, they're running around. I'm going to say like an 8-year-old's what I'm seeing in my head right now. And they're running around like, why? I love this. And then they'll throw it down and go over and grab this. I love this. And then, and it's because at that stage of life, the brain is developing and creating synapses. But a very interesting thing happens around 11, 12 years of age, is the brain begins to prune itself of connections that have been made that are no longer useful or being used.
Okay.
And so the connections that they are making at this age and that they are using become very strong. So I'm sure we've all experienced this. Like last week, they loved Buzz Lightyear, and so you were all excited, and you found this cute Buzz Lightyear, and you bring it home, and they're 12, and they're like, oh no. I remember with Michael, my oldest, there was this really thing that he loved, and I was so excited when I brought it home to him. And what were you thinking, Mom? And I'm like, didn't you love that last week? But the reason I'm bringing that up, because about 12 years old, you're going to see a great shift in their personality. You're going to see a great shift in the things that they love, because there's a lot of clearing, and that's why you see forgetfulness, goofiness. There's a lot of things, and lack of organization, because those wirings are doing a rehaul up in there, and they're not able. So that's why in middle school, it's really critical that you help keep them organized. There is a level of responsibility, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying do everything, but there is, and I say this because I've sat in many of meetings that, well, they're 12, they should be, well, they really can't. And it's because there's so many things happening up in there and pruning away. Back to that tree, when I had talked about the neuron forest, and I think it's so evident. And then like all of us, and like fall time, the trees lose their leaves to create. And that's really what the teenage brain in middle school is doing. Then in high school, a really interesting thing happens, is that's when those really strong connections, that's where they begin to identify with who they're going to be. And that's why those conversations of, what do you think? How do you feel about this? Because those are where those super strong connections are taking place. And there's a little experimentation in when they're trying to develop whom they want to be. And so that might be one day, we all have teens, so we've seen this, where one day they look this way, and then they walk through the door and they've turned into an emo, black hair. You're like, but that experimentation is really normal, and they're just trying to establish where they fit in all of this. And so, I laugh as someone because based on my job, I see it constantly. I'm like, well, last week you were wearing pink, and this week you're solid black, and just that whole gamut of, and it's just based on those connections are really wanting to be formed, and helping them identify who it is they want to be is really critical in the teenage years, and not letting someone else make those decisions for them. Because let's face it, guys, we have a world out there that's trying to seek and destroy, or Satan's trying to seek and destroy our kids, and trying to put more in those brains and really confuse them. Teenagehood is a time of confusion regardless to what's going on. And when you look at the last, I guess it's been the last 20 years is where I've really seen, like, I'm scared to death, hanging on, where are we going? But really, please love on those kids, talk to those kids, understand where they're at neurologically, understand where they're at in a society that's all telling them to be this, that it is okay to be this, encourage all of that, encourage them in their times of unorganizational craziness, because I've walked in my son's room and been like, how do we live like this? And then those comments, though, are in the way the teenage brain is wired, is really damaging, because they take everything to heart. And so I've been working, and during COVID, I've been working really hard to flip my script and to be very mindful of how can I say this in so
A helpful way. Yeah.
well, me and my dorky brain research stuff, I've been talking a lot about brain research and how it is actually proven that organization and neatness around you affects your learning ability, it affects your mood, and all of those kinds of things. So it definitely is research based.
Yes.
Yeah.
One other thing came to my mind is that, it's so important to pick good friends.
Oh, yes.
That's straight out of the Bible. I always told my kids, if you only have two really good friends that follow the Lord, because you want to be on the same page.
Yes.
If you want your children to grow up, in the Lord, pick those few friends. You don't have to be friends with everybody.
No, that's true. And I think that that's one of the things school does a little bit of disservice to you, is they make it you feel as if you're, the programming and stuff is designed. And what my son and I talk about a lot, you guys might have said this to your kids, it's better to have 4 quarters than 100 pennies.
Yeah.
And so we focus on that as well, like
Yeah.
really making sure that those friendships are valid and true. And
I have friends since junior high. We're
Right,
still friends.
right,
that's
right.
been a long time ago.
Right.
But they're very close, and I chose a very good group of friends.
And it's nice that you had the insight to be able to do that, because
Well, my twin brother was off choosing the wrong friends.
And you got to
So I
see.
got to see
Yeah.
what direction that took him, and I
that
wasn't.
is interesting.
I did not want to do
Right.
that to myself, because
Right,
it
right.
was enough pain watching all that he had to go through.
Right.
And so,
So my experience was a little bit different in teenagehood because we moved all the time. I went to 17 different high school and junior high.
Oh
so I was
my!
constant.
Wow.
So, when you're a new kid, it's amazing. It is hard to make friends.
Yes,
and
it's
so
so true.
forth. And so I know it is interesting how that affect. And then I kind of got to that mindset where I quit trying because I knew we were going to move again. And that's where I'm concerned about some of our kids now with this experience of isolation. That some of them, I read another article over the weekend, and it was talking about this has created kind of they're a little bit apathetic in that a lot of kids around the country don't even want to go to college any longer, that they're just kind of checking out.
Yeah.
They're kind of asking why. And so I think we as a society need to be really careful. As a Christian community, we really need to build up our kids. And man, we need to build up our kids to be strong stewards for this next wave of stuff that I just think that we're just seeing the beginning of it.
Yeah.
I think that we're, God's calling his people. He's calling his
Yes.
kids. And I've
Yes.
seen my son grow much closer to the Lord
Yes.
in this last year. And I just want to encourage all of you out there with your teenagers to please reach out and just love on those babies.
Yes.
Understand the craziness or the angst of teenagehood, that it's completely normal,
Yes.
and really
Just pray over them. Pray over them all the time.
And really understand that this last couple of year and a half has really affected most kids.
Yes.
And if you are one of the few luckies whose kids have excelled in this time, bless you. I'm so happy for you, and encourage your kids to reach out to the ones who are really
Yes,
struggling,
yes.
because
Thank you.
there's a whole group out there that I truly am worried for.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, we've really enjoyed sharing our hearts with you, and just about the Lord, and about just the scientific part of this. And we just pray that we will pray over you. We will, and
yes.
you pray
And
for
your
us.
teens too.
And
We
your
just love those
teens.
kids.
Yes,
so,
we do. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a beautiful day. Did you have a last?
Oh no!
word?
I just want to
Nope.
remind you of how beautifully, fearfully,
Yes.
and wonderfully made we are, and
Yay.
to always just revel in that.
Yes.
And yes.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Bye,
God bless
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.